There are so many things to go over with quotations because there are a lot of potential issues that could come up. So this lesson is going to review several of those potential pitfalls. First off, we want to make sure that the thing that we put quotation marks around is actually a direct quote. So direct quotes mean that's the person's exact words. So if we're just summarizing or paraphrasing what they say, we don't put quotation marks around it. A direct quote here would be the track meet is canceled because of unusually cold weather. That was announced by Coach Griffey. The indirect quote might sound like Coach Griffey announced that the track meet was canceled. We don't put quotations around that. We also have to remember that when we introduce somebody else's words, if we're introducing their full sentence, we're supposed to put a capital letter at the beginning of that sentence that we're introducing that was said by them. So, Andy Rooney once said, the average dog is a nicer person than the average person. If you notice there, after said, we put a comma to separate our words from the words of the quote, and then we put a capital letter for the other person's sentence that we've quoted. However, if you're not quoting their entire sentence, you're just quoting a fragment of the original, then you'll begin their words with a lowercase letter, and we don't put a comma in that case. In the novel of Mice and Men, John Steinbeck describes Lenny as drinking, quote, with long gulps snorting into the water like a horse. And notice that's a lowercase w with no comma before because we are just going right into their words and starting with our own. Sometimes we split a quote, which means that we begin explaining what was said, we interrupt it with our own words, and then we continue the rest of the sentence. Now, you may have a capital letter or a lowercase letter in the second part of a divided quotation, and it depends. If you are continuing the sentence, then you have a lowercase letter, as in the first example. If you like board games, said Tyrone, you should come to the party. Notice that we put 2 commas around said Tyrone as well, because that's an interrupting part of the phrase. We also have in the second example, a second sentence is begun. English and French are recognized as official languages of Canada, explained Ms. Hawkins. Again, we have a comma there. When we add on who said it, Ms. Hawkins, we need to separate that from our quote. But then we start with a capital letter on the second part in this case because it's a new sentence. We have 2 sentences there that are being quoted. Remember that if you are assigned to write a short story that you need to indent for each new speaker. A lot of times people don't know this, but you have to, every time somebody else speaks, you have to indent to indicate that there's a new speaker. With commas and periods, the punctuation is kind of simple actually. It's always to the left of the quotation mark. So that means that if it's at the beginning of the sentence, the comma is going to go outside of the quote. As in the first example, Aaron said, comma, I nominate Pilar. But if it's at the end of the sentence, I nominate Pilar for class president, said Aaron, notice how the comma is still to the left of the quotation mark, but that makes it go inside the quote. If we have a question mark or an exclamation point, then what we have is a decision to make. Put it inside the quote or put it outside. Well, here's how you decide. If the thing you're quoting is a question, leave the question mark inside. If it's an exclamation, leave the exclamation point inside. However, if you're the one asking the question and you're quoting something that isn't a question, then you leave the question mark outside. If you're making the exclamation or the person who's quoting is making an exclamation, as in the second example here, I'm tired of hearing you students say this lesson on quotes is boring. In that case, the exclamation is being said by the person saying, I'm tired of hearing, not necessarily by the student saying the lesson's boring. So we leave the exclamation point outside in that case. With colons and semicolons, it's a little simpler. It's outside of the quotation marks. Sometimes we have an interesting situation with a quote within a quote. In this example, you can see that the story is a short story, The Most Dangerous Game. That would normally be in 2 quotation marks, but since it's being quoted, it's inside somebody else, Marta's quote here, you will have a single quote inside the double quotes. And we also can have a lot of errors when we're introducing quotes on essays. So this is one of the main problems, is trying to use quotes within essays. We need to make sure that we put context before the quotes, not after. So in the first example, the context all comes at the end when it's too late. We've seen the quote, we don't know who said it, and now we're already confused. Whereas in the second example, we've got the quote after the context introducing it. We even have who's saying it. He tells Lenny and who he's saying it to. And then we have that comma with the capital Y for introducing the new sentence that's in the book. We also don't want to create a fragment or comma splice. In the first example, we see the introduction of the quote is just the words "for example." Well, that doesn't make a complete sentence, so we can't introduce quotes in that way. In the second example, we've introduced the quote with a comma. Crooks reveals to Lenny that he wishes he had a companion. We should be using a colon there because we have a complete sentence, not a comma. If you remember, a comma splice is when you have two complete sentences, independent clauses, that are spliced together with a comma. Instead, here you should have a colon because the quote proves the complete sentence that you said right before the quote.